Again, thank you so much, Jason, for joining us, and welcome to the Music Business Dreams podcast. Um, for people who aren't familiar with you and your work, why don't you give us a brief introduction?
Okay, I am a music blogger who started a website that makes it easier to send your music to music blogs. So my music blog is called Indie Shuffle, and the other website I started back in 2015 is called SubmitHub. And the whole idea of SubmitHub is just that it's a really efficient communication tool for getting in touch with blogs like Indie Shuffle, who became completely overwhelmed by the number of people who were trying to contact them.
Got you. Cool.
That's the small synthesis of it.
Okay. So, and I did a little bit of research, and so I know that you kind of started your career at Google doing executive compensation.
Yeah.
How do you go from Google to Indie Shuffle?
It actually was going from Indie Shuffle to Google. So I had Indie Shuffle going on the side when I moved to DC right after college. And it was this hobby of just sharing cool music I was finding. And on the side, it was sort of growing and blowing up a little bit. And I was working for a consulting firm doing executive compensation in DC. And I hated it. I hated it. And I was on the chopping block. They were going to fire me. I remember my boss saying, "You're spending way too much time on this stupid website. You need to focus on a real career and actually start doing important stuff." And I was like, all right, well, screw you. So I was about to get fired. I was under performance review, and on the side, I had Indie Shuffle sort of blowing up. And out of the blue, Google reached out to me through LinkedIn. And I think it's just because I had such a specific subset of work, executive compensation. There weren't that many people doing that. There probably still aren't that many people doing it. And so they reached out to me and said, "Hey, do you want to do executive compensation?" And I was like, "Are you kidding me? I love executive compensation. It is my dream." And so next thing you know, I flew out to San Francisco to do the interview. And I mentioned I had this music blog on the side. And of the people I was interviewing with, 3 of them were about to go to Coachella together. And so when I mentioned I had a music blog, they were super stoked. And I was like, "Oh, you're going to Coachella, you're going to see so-and-so and so-and-so." They're like, "Yeah, we're so excited." And so I think I actually ended up getting that Google job in part because of Indie Shuffle, because they thought it was so cool. And then while I was at Google, so I was there for 3 years, Indie Shuffle kept on growing and growing and exploding and getting bigger. And they actually would use it as an example of the type of person they wanted to hire. So I guess this is one of those cases of being in the right place at the right time, because there were a lot of amazing people at Google, and I won't say I was necessarily one of them, but they would always say like, "Oh yeah, Jason's a great example of what we want in a Google employee because he's got this cool music blog on the side, but he also does his job at Google." And they would actively go out and try to hire people who were doing that. So there were tons of cool people at Google when I was there who had side projects, whether it was like a non-profit food bank type thing, or they were part of the women's synchronized Olympic team. Like there was just all these random things, and they were always looking for the extra thing. Like, what do you do besides work?
Wow.
What do you do besides work? And so for me, it was Indie Shuffle. So actually that came first, got me fired from the one job and got me hired at Google. And then 2013, I quit Google. I was like, I can do this full time now. So yeah, that was that journey.
Wow. So how was it balancing the two? I mean, I know you were the the shining star, but it couldn't have all been sunshine and roses trying to grow this blog while doing a full-time job as well.
So one thing Google does really well is they keep you there. They feed you breakfast, they feed you lunch, they feed you dinner. They pick you up on a bus, they drop you off. You live in San Francisco, you work down in the Silicon Valley. It takes an hour at least to get back and forth. So what do? You leave a bit earlier and you come home later. And so the end effect was that you were kind of at Google from 7 a.m. till 8 p.m. every day type of thing. And so there was a balance to be struck between the two. And I definitely had moments of downtime, I'd go out on the lunch break or breakfast or whatever, where I'd go and work on Indie Shuffle, and then I'd come back and work on, figuring out how much to pay the executives. And it was a little hectic. I think that's partially what led me to say, hey, I'm leaving Google. This is just, it's too stressful, and I've got this opportunity to do something that's not as stressful. And so for me, it was kind of a no-brainer. And also I was getting offered a chunk of money to run Indie Shuffle. We were going to get paid $180,000 per year by Spin Magazine, and they were going to take over all of our advertising. And 2013, when I quit Google, that was like the peak of music blogging. That was it. 2013 was it. And I think of just blogs in the world, not just music, but like knitting blogs, cooking blogs, whatever. Like blogging was legit in 2013. And in 2020, Facebook and Google have killed everything independent and unique on the internet, and it sucks. But I digress.
Gotcha.
So yeah, I thought I had it made, and I signed this contract for 180 grand a year, and I actually never got paid. So it was a pretty big jump to take, to be like, cool, I'm bouncing from Google. I had this invisible paycheck I thought was coming, and it just never came. So that was a bit of a wake up call. In like mid 2014, I was like, what the heck? Was that the worst decision I ever made, or can I get through this? So that's when I started thinking about SubmitHub and whether I could create another business, or at least something to keep me from having to knock on Google's door and sort of say, hey, remember me? Things didn't work out. I want to come back. And like, I dreaded that because it's almost like conceding defeat.
Right. Yeah. So you're running Indie Shuffle. Things aren't going like you hoped financially. But what were some of the challenges that led you to SubmitHub, just from a blogger's perspective, that even brought the idea on?
So 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013 was the heyday of music blogging. Hype Machine was king, right? If you could get into the top 10 on Hype Machine, the record labels would sit down at their A&R meetings on Friday and go through that list. I mean, it was the most influential thing. Bonnaroo is trying to figure out who they should book for their music festival. They're going to be looking at the Hypem charts. So what that meant was that if you were a blog who was listed on Hype Machine, you actually had quite a lot of influence in the music industry in terms of who could break out and what traction they could get. And so the downside of that was we all became overwhelmed by the number of people who were pitching us. So in the early days, it was not common knowledge that you would go and email as many blogs as you could. And so it was kind of cool at the start to get these emails from people sending their music. And you're like, oh, cool, sure, of course I'll listen to your song, and occasionally you'd find one you really liked enough. But by the time 2013 rolled around, I think I was getting more than 300 emails per day from artists, labels, publicists, and 99% of them were not tailored. They weren't handwritten. And even the ones that were, you could tell they actually hand wrote 100 of these, and they put a lot of time into writing these emails, right? And then just no one would respond. And it's not because we hated them. It's just because for almost everyone, music blogging was a hobby. I was kind of one of those unique few who got one of these ad deals. And so imagine if it's your hobby, you got your day job, you come home, you crack open a beer, you're like, all right, I just want to blog a song. You open up your inbox and you're like, okay, I'm going to close that inbox and just never look at it again. And that's what was happening. So that was one of the biggest pains in the butt for Indie Shuffle. And it also meant that I was missing out on a lot of music discovery. So I was ignoring my inbox. I wasn't paying attention to new acts. I was kind of just regurgitating the same shit that all the other bloggers were doing. And that actually was part of the power of why Hype Machine got so influential. Us bloggers got so overwhelmed that it really condensed to a few blogs who would make the initial discovery, and then everyone else would just pile on. So we weren't even looking at our inbox anymore. We were just looking at other blogs for cues of what we should cover. And so 90% of the stuff going up on Indie Shuffle was from artists that we had already covered before, or that we already knew, or that were already getting their break. So we by ignoring our inbox, we were missing out on a lot of new music. And so the big problem I was trying to solve was to go, okay, well, how do I turn this thing that's become a problem and a frustration for us into something that's actually useful? And I think that's where, you know, SubmitHub came in. It was just a simple form, artist name, song title, a link to your song. And I didn't ask for any of the pitch. I didn't want to know like how your grandma inspired you to write this. I didn't want to have a giant MP3 file attached. I didn't want to have a zip file with like 14 songs in it. I just didn't want that. Give me your SoundCloud link. And then I just whipped up a little bit of code to be able to play that in line. And I could just go thumb up, thumb down, thumb up, thumb down. So in its original form, SubmitHub was simply a tool for me to go through my submissions. And it was like night and day in terms of the way that Indie Shuffle's content shifted. It went from covering artists you knew to suddenly like artists whose names I couldn't even remember a week later because they were all new, and I was just going, it's kind of still like that. Almost every time I'm blogging someone, it's a new artist I've never blogged before, and 2 weeks later I probably can't remember their name, which I think is another whole separate problem of the music industry today. But yeah, it transformed the way we paid attention to our submissions. It solved that problem for us. And it actually also, oh gosh, I mean, some people will recoil when I say this, but it helped artists in a way, because prior to this, many of them were just being completely ignored, right? You would send out 100 email pitches, you'd get 5 back, and those 5 were trying to look for payola. They were like, yo, cool, didn't even listen to your song, but you pay me $50, I'll put it up. So as an artist, it sucked having to pitch your music, and one of the only ways you could really get it out there was to hire a publicist for a couple grand a month, and then, I mean, what are they gonna do? So yeah, it became a really efficient, and it's cheap compared to a publicist, right? So with SubmitHub, you can use it for free, but if you pay with premium credits, it's still cheap. It's like you can contact 50 or 100 curators for a fraction of what it would have cost to hire a publicist, and you're going to get way better return on at least that section of your PR campaign than you would have with a publicist.
Right.
So, yeah, I'm rambling, but...
Oh, no, it's cool. It's cool.
Yeah.
So, so SubmitHub really solved a real problem for you as a blogger. And how was it getting other blogs to adopt it as their submission tool?
Both easy and hard. So once I was able to make a connection with those blogs, it was easy because they had this problem as well. But ironically, you know, we started, I had an intern working for me at the time named Dylan, who's now actually part of the full-time team. And so we started by saying, okay, cool, let's email every single Hype Machine blog. And there were about 1,000 of them. So I sat there and I cracked out, I think I cracked out 600 to 700 emails, each of them hand-tailored to these blogs. I'd like look them up on Twitter, send them a tweet, do this. I was doing everything that artists were trying to do. And eventually I was like, yo, Dylan, you got to come help me. This is killing me. It's sucking my soul out. And part of it was because none of them responded, right? I think I got like a 3 or 4% response rate, which was what artists were also experiencing at the time.
Right.
So it was easy because once I connected with them, they were down with the idea. And it was hard because so few of them actually paid attention to my email.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. So we've talked about, you know, what led you up to SubmitHub, and I guess now we should talk about SubmitHub for the perspective of the artist. And you've already hinted at, you know, a lot of the benefits that SubmitHub provides, but could you give artists a rundown of what SubmitHub can do for them, what they can pitch for, and it's kind of how the platform works?
Cool. So I think we are unique in terms of promotion tools out there in 2020, because the only thing I promise is that you're going to face a ton of rejection. It's like the opposite of what people want. But so SubmitHub is a way to contact curators. We've got 1,200 of them on there now. Indie Shuffle's one of them, but there's YouTube channels, SoundCloud, Spotify playlisters, a ton of Spotify playlisters. And we've actually just started opening it up to Instagram and TikTok influencers, particularly because the music stickers that you can put on stories on Instagram, those are monetized now. So if you go through your distributor like DistroKid or something, you can actually get paid out for that. So the tool itself is a really easy way to communicate with these guys. You upload your song, you choose who you want to send it to. We give you a ton of statistics, information. There's genre, bias, history, like all sorts of stuff. It's almost overwhelming how much data we present you with. And you get to decide who you want to send to. You can send to them for free. That's fine. But if you use what are called premium credits, which range from anywhere between 60 cents to a little over $1, you're going to get a few things back. You're going to get a response within 48 hours, which was, unheard of back in the email day. You're going to get a guaranteed listen of 20 seconds, which seems like it's not very long, but I think a lot of people can make up their mind in 20 seconds if they want to listen to the next 20 seconds. And I think it's worth noting that the average listen time is almost 2 minutes across the website. So all of that's actually, you can go to submithub.com/listens and you can see every single curator's average listen time. The other thing you're going to get is if it is a rejection, you're going to get hopefully an explanation of why, or at least some. They're required to give 10 words of feedback. And my original intent there was that the feedback is supposed to demonstrate that you listen to the song and let people know why it's not a good fit. So the feedback actually tends to be one of the toughest parts for artists because the average approval rate on SubmitHub is 10%. That means if you send your song to 100 curators, on average, about 10 of them are going to say, cool, I'm going to cover this, right?
Mm.
Oftentimes, the bigger and more influential the outlet, the harder it is to get covered. The Indie Shuffle's got a 3% approval rate. So that means that for every 100 submissions we get, we say yes to 3. And we get about 100 a day, so that means we're blogging about 3 of those songs per day.
Wow.
There's some YouTube channels on there who can pull millions of views on each of their uploads. Those guys might only approve a song every couple days, right? So they got a 1% approval rate.
Mm.
And all of it is publicly visible and there for you to see, but the end result is that you're going to face a lot of rejection. So you send your song out to 100 people, 10 of them say yes, but the other 90 are going to come back explaining in a nutshell why they passed. And the variation in feedback you're going to get is enormous because those 90 people are each unique individuals, probably from different parts of the world. For some of them, English isn't their first language. Others are bloggers. But if you send to Spotify playlisters, for example, most of these guys have no writing background. Like they don't blog, they just put songs in playlists. And so you sit them down and say, hey, tell me why you don't like this song. It's actually really hard for them to put that into words. And so some of the feedback you're going to get is just totally off the charts. And you had a guest on a little while ago, Ari Herstand,
Yes.
who was one of the first ever to review SubmitHub 2.5 years ago. And he really knocked it down a notch. He was really real about it. And one of his biggest gripes was around the feedback and the fact that he doesn't really want feedback. He's got a finished product. He knows his song is ready. If you don't like it, just don't cover it and move along, right? But he had these people coming back and being like, oh, I feel like the mixing would be a little better if you did this, or maybe you should change your vocals. And he's like, no, shut up. I know what I'm doing. Don't tell me to change.
Right.
So Ari actually asked for us to integrate a feature where musicians, instead of asking for feedback, they could say, no feedback, but you have to listen for at least 90 seconds. So we added that based on Ari's request, and it actually ended up being a bad thing, surprisingly. Yeah. So it's good for the artists who don't want to pay attention to the feedback because it can really sting, right? You spend months working on a song, you put it out there, you think it's good, and then suddenly you got 90 random people. Some of them know what they're talking about, most of them don't, just shitting on your song. So for a lot of people, the 90 seconds seems like a good idea, but what actually happens is that the feedback process of these bloggers writing their feedback, or a Spotify playlist, or whoever you've sent to, the process of sitting there and going, okay, let me think about this song and what I like and what I don't like. That process actually makes them think about it. And oftentimes they end up changing their mind and going, yeah, you know what, this isn't that bad. Actually, oh yeah, that was cool. All right, cool, I'm going to cover this. And when you throw one of those 90-second submissions their way, they get ready to go through this thought process. They sit down and they're about to type, and then it says, oh, you don't have to type. It's a 90-second submission. And so then they just sort of bounce. They open up Reddit, start cruising in the background. And what we found was that those 90-second submissions have no, like, people lose focus. And they end up having around a 5% approval rate. And the feedback ones are actually around 12% right now. So back to your original question, what's it like for an artist? It's, I've seen so many different takes on it, right? A lot of people are used to going out there on the internet looking for promo services and seeing things like, oh, guaranteed plays, $50 you'll get 100,000 plays, or we're guaranteeing to put you in these playlists. It's all organic. By the way, if you ever see anyone say organic in their marketing materials, turn the other way and run. Because the very fact that they have to specify it's organic means it's not organic. So there's so many services out there promising results, and people get roped into it. It's a lot of people fall for it, right? And so they come to SubmitHub, and it's got a completely different model where you just end up getting hammered, right? It's a total knockdown of your ego. Kanye West would struggle on SubmitHub. He would turn around and call it a scam. And so for some artists, it's a really important growing experience. Some of those who are more advanced in their careers can handle that criticism. And I think actually where SubmitHub has become really useful today is in trying to identify your niche. Feel free to interrupt me because I'm just going on tangents, but how to use SubmitHub as a tool. I think a lot of artists are looking for overnight success, right? You come in, you got a great song, you promote it, and you're hoping that it's just going to blow up. But the reality is that everyone's got great songs right now. It's never been easier to make a great song. And someone who's super talented might still get eclipsed by someone who just knows how to use their software better. The internet is flooded with music, and that means that your odds of breaking out, even if you get someone big to write about you, are highly unlikely. Those days, that sort of hype-em day of like 2010, 2011, that blowing up overnight, it doesn't exist anymore. There are very few artists who are able to do that. Like, it still can happen, right? But it's so rare, right? You need someone, just to bring them up again, you need someone like Kanye West to sort of bless you and be like, cool, I'm bringing you in and pushing you out. So it's not impossible, but I think when you put in perspective that there are 50,000 plus songs per day uploaded to Spotify, going into something like SubmitHub hoping for overnight success is the wrong way to do it. So I mean, if I was an artist today, for me, what my focus would be is on finding 1,000 real fans. So there's this guy, I think Kevin Kelly or something, who's wrote this book or did a podcast about 1,000 true fans is all you really need to like support your career.
Right.
And so I think if I was an artist today, that would be my focus, rather than trying to go in there and hope you can blow up. Like, how do I get on Spotify's hugest playlist? How do I do this? How do I do that? One strategy, I think, is to try and find the people who connect with and enjoy your music and you and your story or whatever it is that you're presenting as your brand, and really grow in there. And so I think, you get 90% rejection on SubmitHub, but that other 10% should hopefully help push you towards finding that niche and learning more about who the type of people who like your music actually is, and then growing within that. So once you find it, be like, cool, here it is, let me grow within that. And SubmitHub allows you to create a connection with those curators. So say Indie Shuffle approves your song, you now actually have it opens up a chat with Indie Shuffle, and you can chat with us at any time. So notice I've got a Pluto plaster on. So I'm like waving my arms around. I was trying to convince my daughter that she should wear a plaster today, and she didn't want to, so I put some on. So as an artist today, I think if you come into SubmitHub hoping to blow up and break out, you probably have your expectations in the wrong place. But if you come into it approaching it as it's just a really efficient communication tool, it's a good way to learn what the broader public thinks about your song, right? Because you're never going to please everyone. So it's a good way to chuck it out there, expose it, and see what people feel like, so that you can find the right direction.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of one of the ways I think about it. I don't think there's any service or any platform anymore. Like even Pitchfork, which was the biggest blog out there, right? They themselves were probably as influential as Hype Machine. I think they've lost, even they don't have that influence anymore, right? They just can't, no one pays attention to what Pitchfork's saying anymore. You can put it on your press kit and be like, yo, Pitchfork wrote about me. And that's probably really good if you show up at a label and you're trying to sign a deal. But at the end of the day, if you get picked up on Pitchfork these days, you're probably going to pick up a few thousand extra listeners. Maybe you'll sneak into some Spotify editorial playlists, but you're just not going to blow up. You're not going to do, I don't know, I'm thinking of like Lana Del Rey, Chance the Rapper, Tame Impala, like all these acts were the ones who rode that wave of, even The Weeknd, right? He's topping all the charts everywhere now. If you go look at Spotify's top 10, I think he's got 2 songs in there. Blogs, music blogs, that's where you got to start. He was doing like covers and remixes of stuff, and we were just enraptured by it. So I don't think that can happen anymore. And that's both cool and sucks.
Yeah.
But it's cool because I think a lot more artists today have an opportunity to get something.
Right. Yeah, I remember I was in college when, the blogs were still the big thing. And I discovered a lot of my favorite artists that way. I remember finding out who Drake was right before So Far Gone came out. I remember when The Weeknd, like no one knew what he looked like, and he was posting these Michael Jackson covers. And that was an interesting era. It was great. But I mean, I was someone who had nothing but time, right? I mean, my classes were like 3 or 4 hours out of a 24-hour day. And when I got home, I could search up Nah Right or whatever blog I was on at the time. And there's like, here are the 5 posts for the day. Here are the 5 artists that I'm going to listen to. And it's rapid share links. It's all kinds of unsafe downloading viruses and stuff.
Yeah.
But I've got 3, 4 mixtapes to listen to now.
Yeah. You're making me think of Kid Cudi as well. His mixtapes were everything on the blogosphere. And he would go and do mixtapes of all the other artists that were blowing up.
Right.
And he was really smart because he did crossovers. So he was coming from more of like an urban and hip hop side, but then he would go and he would do renditions of like indie rock stuff. And man, the blogosphere just lost their mind for that.
Right. But something that we didn't have then was Spotify. Streaming wasn't big in the States yet then. So, but now we've got any song we want to listen to, whether it's a signed or an unsigned artist, right in our pocket on our phones. And we've all got high-speed internet. Even if we don't have it at home, we've got it on the phones. And so that sort of transition certainly did a number on blogs. Then, we didn't have Netflix and all these other things to waste our time with. So the blogs didn't have as much competition. Now it's like, I'm listening to Spotify. It's probably like just background music. I just turn on a playlist and now I'm doing something else. Right. And so it's like blogs can't be as effective as they were because we don't have time to sit in front of a computer and really download or digest all of this content. But
That's too much. Yeah.
But something that you guys have implemented has, like you said, you've got Spotify curators, you've got YouTube curators, you've got all these other media personalities and TikTok influencers and things like that. How have you seen any sort of a difference in engagement rate or the types of success stories since these new avenues have become available?
I think my biggest realization here is that things have become more fragmented rather than focused. So there was a time where everyone was observing that music blogs were losing their influence, and that's because of the rise of Spotify and also some of Google's changes to search results. If you search a song, it's like a giant video instead of the results underneath. And blogs used to get a lot of traffic from that, and not anymore. It all just goes to YouTube. So there was a time when you could have easily convinced me that Spotify playlists were going to be the new blogs. That was it. It was all just shifting to that. But I think the reality has actually become that Spotify has spoiled us for choice and made it a bit more of a passive experience. So people aren't out there actively discovering music the same way they used to. And Spotify playlisting actually hasn't replaced the blogs in the way that there's some independent curation and thought behind it. So I mean, you talk to Ari, he's going to give you a whole bunch of tips on how you can maximize your Spotify action. He brings up this artist, it's like Lascivious or something like that, who's done really well using Instagram stories to drive plays to his Spotify. And in essence, that's actually, it's like a form of arbitrage, basically. He's like, cool, I'm going to pay Instagram $3,000 a month because the streams are going to make $4,000 a month and I walk away with $1,000 profit. So he's doing it in a clever way, but as soon as those Instagram ads stop, what happens? Hopefully he'll still retain some of that following, and hopefully, I mean, in his case, he's poured a lot of money into it and done it very effectively. But I think for many artists, they'll find that these Spotify playlists that they get on and these Spotify breaks and all that, it's not lasting. It's temporary. As soon as you get pulled from that playlist, everyone forgets who you are because they're listening passively. Like, especially all the rage right now is these lo-fi, hip-hop, study, chill beats playlists. I love them. It's kind of my favorite type of music right now, especially because when I'm working or coding, it's non-intrusive, right? It goes to a separate part of your brain. I don't know 90% of the artists I'm listening to. Like, I can recognize a song, but you tell me who I'm listening. Like, who are you listening to?
Right. I mean,
No idea.
just to go along with that, I got my start. I was rapping, and then I started making beats, and then I kind of transitioned into the music or the management and marketing side of the industry. I have not put out music since 2011. Not officially, not like really working as an artist. Yeah. Now, when I started doing this music marketing consultation type stuff, I signed up for a DistroKid account really just to record tutorials on, hey, here's how to get your music into DistroKid. I made a beat, put it on DistroKid. It came out like 3 days later, and crickets, right? Because I wasn't doing it to promote it. I was just doing it to have content for the video.
Yeah.
Last month, some random person in Sweden put that instrumental on one of his playlists, and it didn't get like some crazy amount of views, but it got like 150 streams or something. But my point is, that's me not doing anything, and I am fully confident that person has no idea who I am, could not pick that song out in a lineup, and it'll be forgotten just as quickly as he put it on that list. And I think the issue is that so many of the artists that I'm consulting with, they're looking for that, the low-hanging fruit, right? They're looking for, okay, I can do this and this is working today and this will get me views. My sister-in-law, she is a Christian music singer, and she just put out her first single the beginning of January, and she did some pitching through SubmitHub, and it worked out for her. I think her song's at like 47,000 streams right now. And so it's like, that's a pretty cool success story for a debut single, right? But a lot of artists, they're not doing the necessary follow-up. They don't have a presence off Spotify to draw people to. So it's like, okay, at the height of this interest and this engagement, no one can find you anywhere else. And then when you drop off the playlist, that's it.
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
I think so we started to see this in 2010, 2011, 2012, where more and more artists were releasing singles instead of albums. And I remember that sort of shift going on where when I started blogging, everything was album based. I would discover albums I loved and I would listen through it and try to find a single. And by the time 2013 was rolling around, all the talk was like, you got to lead with your single, right? Lead with what's your single? What's your single? What's your single? It's got to come out before your album. And then I remember there was this band called Oh Wonder who did sort of, it was like a male-female vocal, nice and chill, but they blew up on the blogosphere. And one of their strategies was that they actually released every single song on their album as a single on the 1st of the month. So all the blogs knew on January 1st, February 1st, March, etc., there's going to be a new song from these guys. And they were one of the first acts that I remember actually saying, well, albums are not the way to go anymore. We have to do these singles and just keep people aware, right? You can't just, boom, put up a single and then disappear, ride that wave, and come back 2 years later with your next album. You just have to keep on going. And so I think what you see a lot now is that artists might not even be making albums, or their album just ends up being a compilation of all their singles. But The way to do it these days is you just have to constantly be going. Like every month you got to release a new single. And and that actually is where SubmitHub can be quite useful for someone who's serious about doing this. Is, you put your single up, you get 10 bites. A month later, you come out with another single. You definitely go back to those 10 people who approved you the first time, because they're likely to recognize and maybe approve that as well. And SubmitHub will tell them like, hey, you've approved these guys before, right? So they can see that they've interacted with and approved them before, and you just got to keep going back and hammering them. And so you'll see a lot of the artists who are in SubmitHub's popular chart are actually in there over and over and over again, and they've gotten a lot better at it because they've been using SubmitHub for so long that now they're like a recognized name. Every time they submit a song, people notice. And there's a lot of artists I see sending to Indie Shuffle. I'll see it pop up in the queue. I'll be like, cool, well, I liked your first 2 songs. I approved that, but this one's not feeling it. Pause. But that recognition and that repetition is really important in trying to keep that momentum. It's not just about keeping it going positive. It's just to help it not fall off a cliff. So SubmitHub's not the be all and end all. You definitely have to go out there and do all sorts of marketing. You never know where that break's going to come, right? So obviously you got to hit up your friends. You can go on Reddit, you can go on Twitter, you can go, like some artists do this thing where they try to make one connection every day. I wake up in the morning, I'm going to find one person, I'm going to connect with them about my music, like a connection. So there's all these different strategies you can do, and SubmitHub is just one part of the puzzle. And for a lot of people, it does nothing to move the needle. And for others, for your sister-in-law, it's cool to hear that she got a bump from it. She got something out of it. Mm-hmm. She probably didn't make her money back directly from it, and a lot of artists don't. But like, you got to build up that name and start the snowball, right? You're going to go spend $1,000 on a microphone, but you don't want to spend $50 promoting the song that you recorded on your $1,000 microphone. It's like, and I get from an artist perspective, it sucks that basically if you're a musician in 2020, you make music, and then what happens? Everyone wants your money, right? You got to pay for your distributor, $10 per song per month or whatever. Maybe you got it on special, it's $60 a year. You got to go promote your music. Well, shit, the blogs don't want to hear from you anymore because everyone's trying to contact them. So now you got to pay a little bit of money to get in touch with them. So it's often, it's one of the bigger complaints you see about SubmitHub is just from artists who feel like they are hitting their head against the wall and just being fleeced of all their money as they go. And I think that's the reality of it. And it's actually terrible how many companies are out there taking advantage of that. All these ones offering Spotify plays and Spotify playlists and all that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Those guys are crooks, man. They're crooks. And most of them are Eastern European. It's horrible, but it's basically the artists. Like, I'll often see the argument made, why are artists paying the blogs? The blogs should pay the artists, because without the artists, the blogs don't have content. But it's actually flipped the other way around, because we've got 1,200 curators on SubmitHub, which is actually a significant portion of the Western world's music curators. Mm-hmm. I don't want to say half, but it could be as many as half of them, right?
Right.
So 1,200 is half. Maybe there's 3,000 curators. I don't know. Maybe there's 5,000. Maybe there's 10,000. But there's 50,000 songs per day going up on Spotify. And so the balance of who wants the attention, it's the artists, right? They are the supply and the curators of the demand, and it highly outweighs it, which is why musicians end up having to fork over all this cash, because they're not the ones in demand. Like, some of them make really awesome music, and if you are one of those lucky ones who just happen to hit the right melody or the right tone or the right person or whatever, like, maybe you'll blow up. But it's tough as an artist today. It's tough.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think we've been talking about it all day, but it seems like, it's easier to be an artist. And yeah, it is. It's easier to look official. It's easy to set up a website. It's easy to get your music on Spotify and all the other streamers. It's easy to find someone who will do graphic designs for $5, $10, $50 or whatever. So it's easy to become an artist. It's easy to record the music. I've got a full studio in here, and I'm in a spare room in my house, right? And so,
Yeah.
we've got broadcast quality stuff going on here, and I'm just a regular person. I just all I do is a podcast. But musicians, it's just as easy for you to have professional quality recordings. So
Yeah.
everything seems easy, and I think because of that ease of access, we assume that the rest of it should be easy too. And I think that's where a lot of musicians fall off a cliff.
That's a good point. I hadn't even thought of it from that perspective, but I think you're onto something.
So we've talked about some of the best practices, some of the outlook that you feel like artists should have when they're approaching SubmitHub. Okay, I'm not here because this is like the one-stop shop to get me a million plays and make my dreams come true. But what are
Buffering.
some of the mistakes that you've seen made on the platform?
Okay, cool. We had a slight connectivity issue there, but I think your main question was what are some of the mistakes people have made, right?
Yes, yes.
Cool. I mean, we touched on going into it with the wrong expectations, but one of the biggest mistakes is to just go in there and buy 100 credits and just send it all out. So there's another service that is similar to SubmitHub, but not the same. It's called Playlist Push, and Playlist Push presents their difference when they're comparing SubmitHub to Playlist Push. What they say is, look, at Playlist Push, we will take care of it for you. We'll decide who your songs goes to. We'll make sure everything is just catered for you. You give us your song and your money, we take care of the rest. On SubmitHub, you got to do the work. And that really is the difference. And so for some artists, $500 is nothing. They're just going to pop that off and they don't mind. Let Playlist Push take care of it. Cool, right? But for the majority of artists, $500 is a shitload of money. And I think the biggest mistake you can make on SubmitHub is to come onto it and just assume that you can just send to everyone, right? So people will come on, buy 100 credits and just click, 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 click. They're not even really looking at the statistics that we're showing. So if you go to submithub.com/blogs, the directory is public. You don't even have to pay. You don't have to have an account. You can see everything about every curator. And the stats are, in a way, they're overwhelming, the amount of information there. You can see what their genre preferences are like. You can see their recent shares. You can go look at their blog posts. You can see how often they approve. You can see what their recent feedback looks like, how other users rate their feedback, how many plays they tend to get on their Spotify playlist, which playlist do they share to the most. Like, it's just this overwhelming amount of information that is given to you. And if you spend 1 or 2 minutes reading each one of those, like just read the information we're giving you, you're going to have significantly better results than someone who just runs in there and check, goes down the list and sends it off. Those people tend to have the worst experience, and they actually tend to get the most upset because they sort of assume the system's just going to work. It's going to, you send up your song, everyone's going to love it and put it up. But they're not targeting well. They're not checking to see that this person actually enjoys their music. Or they just chose a whole bunch of outlets that have a 1% approval rate. It's like, well, what did you expect? Did you think you were going to be the 1% for all of them? Like, it's unlikely. You might have been. I mean, sometimes artists do it. There are amazing songs out there, but in general, I would say the biggest mistake is to just rush into it and not pay attention to the information that we're providing you, because not everyone on there is amazing. It's your choice at the end of the day whether you think that curator is worth your time or not.
Right. And so for the artists that are listening, or if you guys are watching us on YouTube, Jason did agree, as we were setting up this interview, to provide some credits so that I can test out the service. So I'm going to run a full tutorial on YouTube about how to use SubmitHub. I've got an artist whose music I'm going to pitch through the service, and we can kind of go through the whole process of choosing outlets and submitting, and then I'll wait for the results, and we'll put all of that up there as well so you guys can see how it works and, judge if it's for you or not.
Yeah. Do you want to do that in a separate video?
Yeah, I'm going to do that in a separate video.
Cool. Do you want me to guide you through it, or do you want to do it on your own?
Sure. Well, I might need a little.
It's up to you.
It's probably easier to do it on my own, but
What I can do is guide you through the first couple selections,
okay.
and then you can go to town and try to figure out the rest of the stuff. But that way I can show you some of the things to look out for
Okay, cool. So
as you
then,
go through it.
so then you want to do that now, or
Yeah, why not? It's Saturday night.
okay, cool.
It's a quarantine night. Every night's the same, right?
Gotcha. So, well, before we get started on that, we can go ahead and sign off. Was there anything that you wanted to add about SubmitHub or anything, or how they can get in touch with you?
Um, Nah, I mean, look, the platform is constantly evolving, and one of the things that I like about SubmitHub is that um, well, I'm trying to draw this balance between both sides, curators and artists, and it's a delicate balance to run. And sometimes people feel like it leans too heavily in favor of the curators, and sometimes the curators think it leans too heavily in favor of the artists, and it's really hard to please everyone. But I think the only thing I can really promise you is that SubmitHub in a year is going to be really different to what it is now, and it just keeps evolving because it's not a finished product, and the landscape's going to change, people's needs are going to change. So yeah, this video hopefully will age decently,
Right.
but if everything works out, it's going to be a whole different platform, and hopefully a better one in 6 months, a year, 2 years, etc. So
Excellent.
yeah,
Well, thank you so much for agreeing to be on the show. We really appreciate your time and then you just telling us your story and all of these insights that you have for SubmitHub. I'm excited to dig into it and share the results with our listeners.
cool. Let's do some digging.
All right.